see if we're still broadcast there. Yeah. Alright, so we might have lost some of that, but that's okay. Alright, while you guys are putting those back together, I'm going to touch base on some other aspects of this. This is all our machine setup, tape wrap coils, frame alterations. So actually this stuff for the most part we'll get into as we do our, probably next month or the month after, probably next month as we do our machine troubleshooting. We're going to kind of revisit each block, each month or so, we're going to revisit our machines, usually about the second weekend, and we'll get into different aspects of how to hot rod and tune and get the most out of your machines. So this diagram over here, however, basically refers to adjusting your contact point, just basically loosening the binding post and turning the screw, which is going to open the gap, which is going to adjust your timing as far as how much time it takes to run from rest position to close position and repeat that process again. So if we have a wider gap, that is going to take a little bit longer to open and close. That's less cycles per second. That's going to give us a little more room to play with it, a little more room to kind of shade and build on top of it. It's basically creating less holes, less perforation. Okay, so when you want to blend something, you want to work it, you want to delicately finesse it in there, that's going to be a better approach than just running it balls to the wall full bore. When we run our liners, we want them to have more cycles per second, more holes, because again our hand speed is faster, and we basically want to pull that almost in one shot. Especially this book very much does not get a whole lot into calligraphy lines, building, sculpting. We'll talk about that more later, but this is more of a one-pass traditional style outlook on lining, where you basically just want to hit it and quit it, pull it from the beginning to the end. All right. Again, as we talked about earlier, the position of your contact screw is going to affect how your spring reacts and how stiff it's going to act or how soft it's going to act. So if you point that towards the top, you're going to use more length out of your armature bar or out of your front spring basically, and that's going to act softer, so it's going to take a little longer to go from rest position to close position. If you do it shorter down, if you're pointing it more like 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock position, you're going to have less of the spring acting, so therefore it's going to act stiffer, which is going to make it faster in terms of when it comes from rest position into a closed position and repeats that cycle. That's going to be more suited to a liner or a fast setting machine, again for thinner pigment. We talked about capacitors. Capacitors are important. They drastically affect your machine. So if it's a larger capacitor, it's going to take longer to fill. It's going to have a little more punch to it. So it can move larger groupings, but it's going to move it slower. So larger capacitors are better suited for color packing or shader machines. Smaller capacitors are going to be better suited for faster running machines such as liners that don't have to push quite as much. Traditionally, especially when this came out, they probably weren't lining with anything bigger than like a 7. Most of the stuff they were lining with like 3s. Nowadays we line with like 14s. We're just bigger and ballsier. We got some crazier, different styles, new school, versus this is mostly about traditional or really 1980s biker style tattooing is what this book represents. But it's where kind of everything sort of started in that. We talked about coils, the difference of the coils. We talked about if we have a 6 wrap, 8 wrap, 10 wrap, or 12 wrap. All right, the more wraps, the longer it takes for the electrical circuit to get around the iron core or steel core where it is generating the magnetism. All right, if it takes longer to get around, it is going to have less cycles per second. So again, that's going to be a little bit better for running something that's using a thicker material, like a thicker ink, such as color. It's going to also allow more finesse, less holes per second. You can really get in there. You could layer, you could blend a whole lot easier with something that's moving a little slower. But that being said, it's going to take a lot more volts to really make it run, and it's going to be a little bit punchier of a machine. If you were running more on like 6 wraps, it's going to be a much faster machine, and you're going to be able to, push less, but you're going to be able to run faster. So again, that's going to be better suited for a liner. Okay. If you were to take a 6 wrap coil and pair it up with, a 10 capacitor, maybe a 10 UF, a very small capacitor, basically, you would end up with a super fast running machine, maybe even too fast, but it's also not going to have a lot of push behind it. So if you wanted to slow a very fast machine so it could push heavier needles with more that have more resistance, larger needle grouping, or to push something like color, then you're going to want to put a larger capacitor on it so it has a little more oomph. Okay. Conversely, if you want to take a slow running machine and make it run faster, you could either change the coils out, or you could simply put a smaller capacitor on it so it would offset how long it takes for the coils to charge. So again, everything affects each other element. Another way you could speed up a slow running machine would be to put a stiffer, what we call a timing spring, or your front spring. That's going to make it come back faster from its rest position and repeat that cycle faster each time. So it's going to speed up the CPS, or the cycles per second. Conversely, if you wanted to slow down a fast running machine that maybe you used as a liner and you now want to convert it over just to have some fun, or maybe you want to get a little bit more out of it, you could take a fast running machine, maybe it has lower coil, less coil wraps or a smaller capacitor. You could conversely run a longer spring on it and make it have a little bit more of a rest when it closes and a little bit less hard of a hit, and you might have something that works very well for gray wash shading. So it's fast running, but it's soft hitting. Okay, so that's going to be a good use for something that you still have to layer, but it's also running a thin pigment. That's going to make a better situation for a gray wash, because that's about as thin as the pigment's going to get, but you don't want to hit it very hard and cause a lot of trauma. Versus a lining machine, you want it to actually have a pretty decent punch, but you want it to hit fast. Okay, it doesn't need a lot of power because it only has to move a few needles, and it does not take much for those needles to break the skin. But you want that pass to be consistent from the beginning to the end as you pull it. So you want it to be able to keep going through even if it encounters a little bit of resistance, or maybe a less than perfect stretch, or just a difficult area as you pull that line. So you do want to have a decent hit when you're running a liner, but you definitely want it to be fast, similar to how we talked earlier about hand speed and flow, if we're referring back to the Photoshop or anything like that. So good middle of the road is going to be 8s or 10s when it comes to wraps. A good middle of the road is going to be somewhere around a 22 UF for your capacitor, pretty stock in that. And then we'll get into how we can affect your positions. Usually they're about 16 or 18 gauge for your springs. Sometimes you match them as a couple, so they're exactly the same. Other times you might want to go up or down in order to create the desired effect on your machine.
think I successfully stripped every single screw on my machine.
Yeah!
Get me once.
There we go. Now, Cuppy already has a problem with his machine.
Oh yeah? Lost some parts? Fucking Ikeas.
Nah, it's not Cuppy's fault. Although this one is. This way.
I thought it was backwards. Yeah, I've had it this way at first. I'm like, no, that doesn't look right.
No, yep. Yeah, the armature bar. When in doubt, refer back, but there's no like correlation. You can make a little note that says this side down. So,
Yeah, this side.
yeah, that side down, yes.
I don't think that day old mac and cheese was a good idea.
I don't think there's nothing about that sounds like a good idea.
Cold day old mac and cheese.
All right, guys, so we could either next week continue further into machines, or we can go back into medical stuff, which is boring, right? So I try to only do like one of those a month. And then machine stuff is fun. We can also get into needles. We could get into, power supplies. What would you guys like to see? Inks. What would you like to see for next week? Any thoughts, any suggestions, anything you particularly want to work on? We can do art stuff next week. What do you want to see so that this doesn't feel redundant,
I like the machine shit.
All right.
Power supply stuff. Would definitely be good.
Okay. We want to go a little bit further into machines next week?
I'm going to need
Yeah.
a little bit further with this machine.
Yeah.
All right, so if we're going further into machines, that means for next week, everybody needs to pick up a basically a machine rebuild kit or a repair kit, something that's going to have multiple sizes for armature bars, multiple springs, multiple capacitors. We can hook up the soldering iron. We can get the spring snips and all that stuff together, the hole punch. So we can do some stuff with that, but everybody would need to have, ideally, at least a small tackle box with some different pieces that we can work with.
Might want to wait another week then.
That might be a good idea.
I guess 2 weeks to order that shit.
Well, we can go back into it and play with it a little bit more as we get in, but we'll definitely, we will definitely need to order those.
This guy over here, this guy makes his own coils. What are you talking about?
Oh, yeah?
Oh yeah, we'll get in
Yeah,
before
that was some cool
we
shit
get
to
down.
see, man. That was really cool to see that shit winding up.
Yeah, now a lot of that stuff we'll be recouping because a lot of it I gave to Ash.
Yeah.
But as we move forward, my goal by the end of year 2 is that every person in this program has hand built their machine and all the components in it. Okay? So eventually I want to get in. We're going to do stuff where specifically all we do is rack coils, where we have a seminar just on coils, seminar just on springs, you know what I mean? Like I said, we got 96 lessons, y'all. But like the biggest thing that I want to work on too is just not getting too stuck on one particular subject because we will keep coming back to it. So next week we could either continue in machines or we could get into an art aspect and maybe do some traditional kind of painting or something along those lines. Do some art stuff and just kind of touch base on different styles. Because eventually each week as we grow, we're going to want to have a little bit of variety in each week. And then the following month, we're going to build on what we touched base on the month before. And then every 3 months, we're going to kind of complete that block and then move to another kind of block where we up the difficulty. But basically every week should build on what we learned, every month should build on what we learned the month before. But I don't want to sit here and just go, all right, bloodborne pathogens and sterilization for a whole fucking month. You know what I mean? I'd rather kind of do like one seminar on that and then a month later do another seminar on that. So you guys don't get burned out, you know what I mean? I can talk machines all day long every day. But the main thing is when we get in, what's going to be really helpful, I think, for you guys is if next week each person, maybe we could bring in a machine. Each person could bring in a machine that needs a little tweaking. You know what I mean? And we can play with that. But we do need to make sure that you guys have parts. So if you guys have parts, you have some other stuff, we want to order some basic kind of repair kits would be helpful. So that's going to be good. We can go through and I can kind of troubleshoot some different aspects. Or what we could do is we could look at rotary next week and just kind of do a basic kind of tutorial on rotaries, the difference between the two.
Too much.
Rotaries are kind of simplistic, but to be fair, there's big differences in
There's
rotaries.
very sensitive things
Yeah,
in there.
there's lots of differences in how they run. There's lots of differences in different types and what they're good for, and different components of what we can do with that with the rotaries.
Rotaries. Good God. Well, it is
Alright.
good boy.
All right, so Phil is having some sticky points
Yeah.
because Phil skipped the step of actually
Yeah, you
recording
know what
each
I-
piece.
you know what
he
I
was
was
just doing the list.
Yeah, you know what? I
Yeah,
thought
he
we
was
were gonna
watching
sit.
me,
I
but,
thought we
like,
were
I'm
gonna
toward
sit
that
down
machine
and put
or
them
two,
all
I
back
think.
together.
Well, that's what we're doing. Yeah, that's what we're doing.
So I'm like, man,
I think
I
Phil
was.
started tearing apart when I
As
did.
with most things, it's usually a trial by fire. All right, so what we got here? Where's your coils?
I know. Yeah, my coils.
All right,
What's that
so
good for?
these here are your coils.
Don't
I
forget
know
that
these
flux
can
These are
wash
your
capacitor.
shims. Put them over here.
Flux capacitor.
The flux capacitor.
Oh man.
These are your O-rings. First thing to do anytime you're taking it apart, putting it back together, organize what you have, okay? These are your non-conductive washers. So where do your non-conductive washers go?
In between the washers.
Okay, but you remember which parts they go on?
It was one on.
What the
Not
happened
on
was.
this one. It was on.
Okay, on your binding post.
Yeah,
Yep.
on
Okay. And where are the guys? Okay. So I used to do this on the hardwire, the separate capacitor. So this is fun because you could easily swap these out because this is already a closed system, but these two pieces are going to need to connect to those. All right, so the most important thing to start off with, of course, we've got our frame, and we're going to come in here. You've got your back pieces are set. So put your coils on there. Now, if you may recall, you may have had equal shims on both,
Yeah.
or you may have had one shim further than the other.
I did. I had two. I actually thought I had two on one,
You probably did.
but then
They might have been stuck
it's-
together a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah, it was stuck together, so it
Okay.
separated when I just tried to pick it up. All right, so. But you know, it was. I thought my shim was right under the.
Yep, your shims should actually be right here because they're connecting, pushing it further back to your armature bar. Okay, so we can go through here, and you're going to put these on. And what you can do is you can put the whole thing back together and then put in your shims, or you can try to feed these in.
Oh, you can do that. Oh.
Yeah, because what
That's
you're
what
going
I
to
was
want to
having
do
a
is kind of
hard
take
time
this off anyway. Like what? Actually, this is kind of the last component of what you should put
Alright.
on. So did
See,
you
that's
take
why
it off?
I
or just
didn't
left
get them
the
on.
damn thing
No,
on?
because the ones Chris had, I couldn't twist it with.
Okay.
It was no, I had,
Did a
nothing.
good job of stripping the shit out of my own shit.
Yeah, maybe get some new tools. How about that?
That's what I get for letting
You made that other one too.
little guy named Dane
Right.
borrow my shit.
Yeah, that's what I tried to do, but I didn't want to break Chris on.
Fuck Chris.
I was like, man, I'm gonna break it if I keep doing this.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god.
I just gave up on trying to get my coils off. I was like, fuck that, man. Those things are round now.
That's the magic. I'm not even sure how you get. You just like this is your grommet right here.
Oh, yeah. That's not even supposed to be on.
Okay, I was like,
I guess you take it off and put it on ramen on.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah, I
I was like, that's interesting. All right, so when we come through here, and we're gonna put this piece on top. We're gonna take. So this is kind of your locking mechanism here. How's it coming over there, Cup? All right, Chris,
Yeah, buddy.
come over here and help Cuppy.
Ah.
Come on, you already know how to do it. Got all these different there.
Let's see what you got, buddy.
Alright. And so make sure whenever you're working,
Non-ferrous.
keep everything kind of where it needs to go.
Non-ferrous.
And
And then you want to... I'm thinking these guys.
It's just easy find it later. Alright, so we've got these. Put your shims on here. And this is kind of arbitrary shimming, but it's really...
The fuck is that about? The fuck is this about?
There's like a loose wire on it.
Yeah.
I think I used to just pinch it between the two washers because I didn't have the soldering iron. Next week we'll get into soldering and do some fun stuff. Alright.
I think these rings were they were under the cord.
Those O-rings should not be under the cord.
Yeah, they were under there though. That's crazy, right? What are these for there?
Well, they might have to absorb the vibration a little
Yeah,
bit.
they were under. They were under
Weird.
there. I
That's
was
so
like,
weird. That's a first. I've never seen that. Yeah, so they're compressed down to absorb the vibration. That's so crazy. I love that this is called the Mickey B. Like it's like a rip on. There we go. That's so weird. Yeah, I mean they're basically just causing like an acoustic dampener, vibration dampener. But it's just a weird little thing. I've seen them on the other side, which is probably where that's coming from.
On
I've
the
seen
top
tape
side.
and
Things are
stuff.
small.
Yeah, to kind of
Okay.
reduce when it hits there. Like actually like glued down and shit.
Do you have the right screw at the right place? I don't think you do. There. I think you switch those screws.
Alright, so basically what this is doing, you want to move it around a little bit, but it's just creating a little bit of like a rubber gasket, so when you get it in there, it tightens up, and so it doesn't wobble itself loose too bad, because one of the things, the problem with this frame, is you have all these separate components, so there's
Maybe
a lot
not.
of room for vibration and chatter, and if you look too, you see all these different metal surfaces, you know what I mean? Like they're different types of metal too, so that's going to affect how the electricity. So marginal stuff, but I mean, it'll definitely, if you were to eliminate some of those things, you definitely would see.
Is this
a
where the nut
difference.
went?
Nah, I don't remember. I think so.
Alright.
If it doesn't look right, then it might not be right.
Isn't that? That's first. Alright, so now, for here, do they have this on the outside of the machine?
it was
Because it should be,
over here somewhere.
yeah, okay. Because this should be rear.
That's not
And this is front.
Alright, let's see here.
Here.
This guy. Get that guy. And it's
This is where your non-conductive. So anything on the side plate, you're going to want to use your non-conductive.
So is that considered a bigger capacitor?
Well, see what they did is they covered it, so
Oh,
you can't
like,
tell,
have it-
but I would say it's
okay.
probably medium.
Oh.
I've seen some, there's some big capacitors,
Yeah.
but it depends. I mean, really, like what we deal with is so small versus, how drastic and big the other stuff is. You know what I mean? So, like, I mean, some of them are real
Yeah, you
big,
had
but
the
like what we use,
rear
we're only
binding
really talking between like the difference
screw
of like
in the
a
wrong
10 and a
place.
22. You know what I mean? It's a small amount, but it makes a big difference in how the machine runs.
I think there's washers in between.
Yeah, there should be washers on both sides. Really, most of these are just to help the compression here, and then also to stabilize it a little bit so it's not just running directly off of it. Because if you crush these down in there, it'll start to turn over one way or the other. So if we do machine building again next week, I think that's going to be like the first order of business is making sure you guys can take it apart and put it back together. be a bad idea to revisit this since Jessica couldn't be here and Ace isn't here and all that stuff. So maybe we will.
Word.
Now, all I'm doing is assembling the parts. This is not necessarily tuning, so we might want to play with that next week and just kind of get in there and start playing with it. How to get the most out of the tuning and the geometry, similar to what I did with your other machines, you know. Which, like I said, even if you just bring, you know, just your repair kit, you know what I mean? That basic stuff, we should be able to do it. I don't have quite as many tools as I used to have floating around, but over time we'll slowly acquire more things. I do believe I've got that hole punch. And then
Yeah.
spring snips are relatively inexpensive, so we could probably do that next week. Work on like
Yeah,
spring
I
cutting.
think
and
I got a
stuff.
couple more frames.
Yeah, we could get
But I
into
got
spring
cool
cutting.
man everywhere. I just never.
Yeah, we could get into a spring specific seminar next week. That would be good.
Yeah, I got some extras blue stock shit.
Good. So I'd like to get into that because I mean I think that was one of those moments, one of those things that really changed the game. You know what I mean for me as far as understanding what was happening with my machine. I'm not gonna worry too much because I just don't want to keep bending this thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put it kind of out here, but. These little wires you bend them too much. I don't like to move it. That's why like, the old timers are all like, "Oh no, man, you don't take a machine apart. You don't want to ruin the magic." So they don't fucking put them back together.
Yeah.
This guy was right there, yeah. Alright. Yeah. Now it's it was a little out of tune before. Now it's all fucked up. Good job.
Yep, that's all right.
That's how you learn.
Man, like, shit, man, I probably spent months. And that's all I fucking do is come in and fucking find my machine taken apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be like, hey, we hit apart. I know you did. Fuckers. Of course, my machine was a time machine by Danny Fowler, so it had a fuck ton more parts and nothing went back the way that it goes on because everything was adjustable. So every aspect of that machine was slotted and moved. So if you took it apart, that thing damn sure wasn't going back the same way. You had to like either mark every little component, but see I had one machine and I would have to like as I was tattooing, I'd have to convert it over into another machine. So like if I was outlining and then wanted to do color or shading, I'd have to change the entire makeup of the machine to make it work for a shade or a color.
Context was
So
fucking huge.
every aspect, yeah. So like when you normally change
Fucking
over
like
tubes, I
little
change over tubes,
tiny
and
little
I adjust the machine into what I needed it to run at prior even to like before we had the diagnostics and shit. So, but in the same respect, I learned a lot about how to make it run, how not to make it run, all that trial and error.
Yeah, that's it. That's that nut is there for.
Yeah, so let's do a spring
Like a
specific
spacer.
seminar next weekend. Next week, that'd be good. Hogwash, I'll tell you a bunch of hogwash.
Maybe it's got one too many shims in there. I don't know. To the untrained eye, it looks like a machine.
Right? That's what I felt. It's like, I'll put in all the parts back where they go, but not for performance, just that's the way they go. Like, we'll fine tune it next week. But, like I said, the other aspect is we will come in And we'll come in and we'll do spring cutting.
Boy,
And then you'll get to really see the differences between like tall springs, thin springs, wide springs, how each thing kind of relates and how it affects your machine. And really all that stuff is just changing gauge. You know, it's just making it act thicker or act thinner and how it affects the machine.
You just got to pay attention to. There's certain things that go together, like the little red bits here. The non-ferrous ones are always on the bottom. These guys are up top, and then you want to get a washer, and then the wire. So washer, wire, and then like another washer, I guess. I don't know. It looks like a machine.
Yep. Looking like a machine. Yep. So next week, spring specific.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, we'll go ahead and cut this off.